Way back in 2014, when a younger, slimmer, sexier me was standing in front of a green screen in my tiny, by American standards, 700 and some square foot end of terrace home in the UK, we covered a story on TEN episode 37 about Ford killing sex.
They're killing sex, joked Musk. We can't agree more.
See, Tesla had originally wanted to call its mid-size electric sedan the Tesla Model E, but Ford had a claim to that name and it threatened Tesla with legal action if it continued with its own claim to the same. Tesla dropped the claim and then turned the E into a tri-bar, which then, of course, later became a regular old number 3. I miss the tri-bar. Now, nearly 8 years after objecting to Model E being used in a car name, Ford has found a use for the trademark it's been keeping in its metaphorical back pocket for a really long time, because Model E is going to become the name of Ford's brand new electric vehicle and software business. Announced earlier today at a press conference ahead of the opening of the stock market, or as I am loath to call it, 5 a.m. Pacific, Ford CEO Jim Farley, accompanied on stage Ford executives, laid out how Ford's plan is not to spin off its electric business from its main brand into distinct and separate entities, but rather to internally reorganize it into 2 different businesses under Ford. And today, assuming the caffeine from my coffee actually kicks in, I'm going to explain what that means. But first, it's time to remind you to click the subscribe button and the bell icon, and hopefully, if YouTube is having a good day, it will tell you when our next videos drop. If it's not, then it won't. We'd also love it if you'd consider supporting us, details coming later, as we really do not want to balance the books by plastering these videos with ads for Raid Shadow Legends. Before I get into today's video, I want to note that Ford also announced during its presser that it would be suspending all operations in Russia and has a commitment to donate $100,000 to the Global Giving Ukraine Relief Fund. It joins a number of automakers to suspend all operations in Russia and joins many other companies in making donations to aid efforts there. Over the last month or so, there have been rumours that Ford was going to spin off its electric vehicle arm completely, establishing it as a startup in just the same way that Polestar was spun off from Volvo. Last week in our News Roundup show, we reported that Jim Farley had refuted those rumours, stating that Ford did not plan to spin off its electric vehicles into separate companies. Today, he confirmed what was going to happen, namely that while Ford was reorganising itself and creating 2 different businesses, everything will stay under one roof. If you're confused at the difference between what Farley said last week and what happened today, and if you're now pulling the face of Snowball the Psycho Bunny, you're not alone. But no pooping on the carpet, please. See, the differences are nuanced, but important. Don't worry, I'll explain both. Then I'll tell you what it means that one, not the other, has happened. Prior rumours had Ford spinning electric vehicles off from the main Ford brand, allowing the new brand to have autonomy and be its own legal entity that was distinct and separate from Ford. Under that rumour, a spun-off, legally separate EV brand would be able to execute an IPO or enter onto the stock market via reverse merger, unlocking the almost unlimited funding that pretty much every other IPO'd and SPAC'd EV company has had so far. But what actually happened saw Ford develop 2 separate business arms under the same company name that will exist in a symbiotic, cooperative relationship. And that's very different from the rumour. To explain it, well, let's look at Star Trek, which has a very good example of 2 different entities joined together. And no, I am not talking about Tuvix. Nobody talks about Tuvix. Although, shock horror? I actually liked him, transporter malfunction that he was. Now, I'm talking Trills, which, for those who aren't nerds, are a species of humanoid that sometimes join in a symbiotic relationship with a form of sentient vermiform common to the planet Trill, aka Trill symbionts, or swimmers. Anyway, a Trill symbiont and a Trill join in a mutually beneficial form. The Trill gets the benefit of the generations of life experiences that the symbiont has enjoyed, because they live a really long time, and the symbiont gets to experience life outside of the symbiont pool it would otherwise have to exist in. Oh, and thanks to the lovely Seán Ferrick from Trek Culture for sharing his cosplay of a Trill. You rock. Which brings me to Ford Blue and Model E, Ford's brand new business which will both coexist under the Ford brand. The former will be responsible for continuing to develop and sell Ford's traditional internal combustion engine models, continue to refine mass production techniques, and yes, I'd imagine continue to sell large numbers of gas-guzzling pickup trucks and SUVs to help fund the massive amounts of money that Model E will consume. And that's because Model E will focus exclusively on electric vehicles, software development, and advanced driver assistance hardware systems like semi-autonomous driving technology, aka Ford Blue Cruise. Under this new arrangement, Ford will continue to trade on the stock market as normal, but when it comes to reporting its quarterly earnings, it will break down its financials into two different portions, one for Ford Blue and one for Ford Model E. In essence, it's the same as Tesla splitting off its energy and automotive businesses into distinct parts of the whole, each managed by different teams, but ultimately all working to keep the money rolling in this case for Ford, and of course the Lincoln brand too. It's all part of Ford's new strategy for the future, aka Ford Plus. To start, all business arms will be based in Dearborn, Michigan, where Ford's headquarters have existed throughout history. But interestingly, during the media presentation, Farley acknowledged that the reorganization will allow Ford more flexibility to site new satellite offices around the world known for their expertise in certain areas. Ford also wants to trim the metaphorical fat from its vehicle development and engineering, noting that both the Ford Mustang Mach-E and Ford F-150 Lightning were designed and engineered by small teams within Ford, teams that were at the time operating under Ford's Project Edison moniker. Company executives have hinted that Ford wants to copy these development teams for future projects, from new vehicles through to new technologies that will ultimately be used in future vehicles. Farley said during the press event that the decision to reorganize Ford was, quote, only about creating incredible products that improve over time, adding, quote, legacy is holding us back, end quote. You'd be forgiven for thinking that would mean that Ford was very eager to dump the pump, but later in the presentation, Jim Farley acknowledged that while ICE vehicle sales may wane over time, he doesn't yet believe they will vanish completely. Giving the example of someone in, say, Montana who needs to haul a horse box for hundreds of miles with their F-250, Farley stated that the EV shift isn't the ideal situation for every single consumer. And while there are, yes, currently edge case uses for internal combustion engine vehicles, like heavy-duty F-Series pickup trucks being one of them, I'd have preferred to have seen a roadmap during the announcement to demonstrate a plan to lower emissions for Ford's largest and most heavily polluting vehicles. While Ford says it remains committed to being carbon neutral by 2050 and wants to use 100% local renewable electricity at all of its manufacturing facilities by 2035, Farley was leery of making broad statements a long way into the future. What he did promise, though, was that Ford would reach an annual production of 2 million EVs by 2026, equivalent to 1/2 of its target global vehicle production volume for that year. On its way to achieving that target, Ford will spend $5 billion on electric vehicles this year, which is twice what it spent last year, and that will include capital expenditures and direct investments. Farley essentially refrained from making predictions about Ford's market share and makeup for 2030, but the accompanying press release to the announcement targets 1/2 of Ford's vehicles being electric by 2030. Importantly, though, and I cannot stress this enough, the press release actually says electric rather than electrified. This is massive and an important distinction, as many of Ford's rivals are choosing the term electrified as their target, and as you might know, that includes everything from mild hybrids to fully battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. Ford says Ford Blue will, quote, strengthen the iconic Ford vehicles that customers love, end quote, with new models and derivatives due to be developed within that ecosystem. Think new models on existing platforms with the F-Series, Ranger and Maverick trucks featuring prominently. Ford's also throwing in its Bronco and Explorer SUVs into the mix, along with the internal combustion engine Mustang and, in Europe, Puma. During the call, the 200,000-long reservation list for the F-150 Lightning was highlighted as an example of how Ford hopes to simplify its lineup in the future. Unlike the rest of the F-150 family, the F-150 Lightning is only available with one cab and one bed design, and Ford thinks it can make similar simplifications in its ICE lineup to save upwards of $3 billion per year, money that it will then plough straight back into its EV programs in Ford Model E. Letting individual teams within Model E behave like startups while levering its economies of scale and position in the legacy world to help it save money on parts and production is, says Ford, what will ultimately give it an edge. The other area it hopes to gain on Tesla and others in, and yes, Tesla was called out as a target competitor, that will apparently be Ford's dealer network. While Ford has been coming down hard on dealerships who price gouge its EVs with massive additional dealer markups, it was pretty clear from today's presentation that Ford doesn't see direct-to-customer sales happening anytime soon. Instead, we can expect a hybrid model where customers can order their vehicles online, as Ford has offered with several of its most recent EV and ICE models, but buyers then work with a local dealership to deal with delivery, after sales and service. Ford admits that Tesla and other direct-to-customer companies have the edge for the new car experience, but when it comes to used cars, Ford believes dealerships are essential in keeping used car customers happy. With every dealership expected to specialise in one or more of Ford's areas, electric, ICE or commercial, I do have some worries that Ford dealerships in more rural areas may not actually embrace EVs at all. But then I should remind you that 81% of the US population live in either urban or suburban areas, and that does give me some hope for Ford's goal of going electric. That's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free-to-join Discord chat room. There are links below me. If you haven't already, make sure you've subscribed to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, and give that bell a gentle ding to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go out to the folk on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons, Chris Maxwell, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leon, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tesla in the Gong, Gordon C., Stephen O'Donoghue, Carl Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Ray Jean Fellows, Aurori Litwin, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, Zachary Courtney, Chrissa Centavar and Denny Hyde, and our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Fagerback, Will Graylin, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Ellery Annesley, and Ian. If you are feeling left out, you can join Patreon at the link below, click the join button on YouTube to become a channel member, or you can show us your support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or our cool swag store. There are links below. Keep your eyes peeled for all of our awesome Portland International Auto Show coverage, which starts tomorrow. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving.